Taking care of you is too much work. I want a divorce. I want my freedom. As soon as I ended up in a wheelchair, that's what my husband started saying. After being together for over 40 years, I can't believe he would say something like that to me. He's a henpecked husband and stubborn, and I have plenty of complaints about him. But after over 40 years, I thought we were family. How could he say something like that? Someday, he'll regret letting go of a wife who did everything for him. My name is Anne, and I'm 67 years old. I want baby soft skin again. Is it too late? No, my heart is still young, so it should be okay. I can say my heart is young now, but I was once very disheartened. That was about 3 years ago. I was struggling with my relationship with my husband, Mike. It's been several years since he retired, and we've been living off our pension. While many people have college degrees, Mike graduated high school and became a department manager at a large construction company before he retired. Maybe as a reaction to quitting his job, he started acting like a boss at home. Mike has always been a henpecked husband. Mike's father and my father were henpecked husbands too. Growing up in the countryside, all my friends' families had henpecked husbands. Because of that, I just accepted that this is how husbands treated their wives. Nowadays, there's a lot of outcry about how being a henpecked husband is disrespectful to wives, and I really feel that's true. Mike, being so stubborn and henpecked, never got along with our only daughter, Karen. Now that she's an adult, she keeps in touch with me but is estranged from Mike. Even Karen rejects him. I'm probably the only one who can handle being with this husband. I could tolerate just being a henpecked husband because I'm used to it, but since retiring, Mike has too much free time and constantly comments on the house not being clean enough or the efficiency of my chores, which is honestly annoying. What do you want for lunch? Something simple is fine. So when I make a sandwich, he gets mad and calls it lazy. While I'm cleaning the kitchen, the drain's still slimy, isn't it? He says. Even if I was about to clean it, if I said that, Mike would definitely get mad, so I stayed quiet. When I argue back, he thinks it's okay to get angry and yells a lot. If it was just that, I could ignore it, but lately, Mike has been unable to control his anger and has started throwing cups, so I try to avoid arguing. At work, he probably yelled at his subordinates with confidence, releasing stress that way. Now, without that outlet, all his anger is directed at me. One day, as I watched a TV show about gray divorce, it didn't feel like someone else's problem anymore. While shopping, I got hit by a bicycle and broke my knee, which required surgery. When the accident happened, Mike was there and looked down at me, in pain, saying, "You're exaggerating." He then quickly went home. A passerby called an ambulance for me out of kindness, and I was hospitalized. Even then, Mike only reluctantly packed the minimum necessities and some documents and handed them to the hospital reception, not even staying with me for the surgery. 2 days after the surgery, "What are you going to do about the house?" Mike finally came to visit and asked, "What? What do you mean?" And I couldn't help but respond. Since I was hospitalized, there was nothing I could do about the house, but what was this foolish husband talking about? I mean the house. I've been doing it, but what are we going to do from now on? Can you take care of it until my leg heals? You're not a baby. I was so stressed out from being in the hospital that I lashed out at Mike and told him exactly what I thought. Naturally, Mike exploded with anger. He ranted about how my neglecting the house was sheer laziness and that I lacked the necessary commitment, causing quite a scene in the hospital room. A nurse quickly came and escorted Mike out, but the other patients gave me cold, judgmental stares. However, it's tough having a hot-tempered husband, isn't it? Mine's the same way. Someone sympathized with me. With friends either having passed away or living far away, I had no one to talk to about my relationship with Mike after he retired. Being in the hospital was a disaster, but it was also good to talk with others about family issues and learn about their situations. It helped me see just how unreasonable Mike was being. I spent about 3 months in the hospital undergoing daily rehabilitation, but I didn't recover as much as I'd hoped and had to leave in a wheelchair. Thanks to all the complaining about Mike I did with my roommates, I felt much better mentally than before I was hospitalized. Mike had been banned from visiting due to an infection outbreak, so I hadn't seen him at all since his outburst in my room. We only communicated the bare minimum through messages, like where to find the fabric softener. Apparently, he managed to live just fine on his own. Mike isn't all bad. We've been together for over 40 years, after all. I decided not to give up on him just because he became more irritable with age and resolved to be a more patient wife who could let his words slide. But then, on the day I was discharged, even though I had informed him, Mike didn't come to pick me up. It was impossible for me, still not used to the wheelchair, to navigate the train and bus alone. I had no choice but to call a caregiving taxi to take me home, and as soon as I unlocked the door, Mike came storming out.
"Why are you back?"
He yelled. "Why? I told you I was being discharged today. Why didn't you come to get me?" I was so shocked.
"You left me to do all the housework for months, and now you have the nerve to complain? Where's your apology?"
"What? How can you say that? I had a hard time in the hospital too. We're both getting old. Can't you support me for once?"
"No.
Mike's refusal was absolute.
I heard at the hospital. And you're going to be in a wheelchair permanently. I won't take care of a defective person. I want a divorce because I don't want to deal with caregiving. I found out I can live just fine alone. I'd rather be alone than take care of an old person who can't do housework and can't even walk properly."
Listening to his relentless complaints, I was stunned that he felt that way. Part of me had believed that despite his changed personality after retirement, deep down he was still the same as before, that our 40 years together meant we had a bond. The idea of a gray divorce had crossed my mind, but I admired the freedom those women had, and I didn't think I would choose that path. After all, we've had fights that made me want to leave, but we always managed to make up. I thought our history would carry us through, that we'd continue to make it work. "Are you sure? You'll regret it?" I asked.
"Absolutely not."
And Mike declared, "Okay, fine. Let's get divorced. I'll leave today. Since you're the one who wants this, can you help me pack?" "I'll do that right away. I'm glad to be rid of you, Anne." Seeing Mike smile with satisfaction almost brought tears to my eyes, but I held them back. I couldn't believe how brief and empty my marriage had turned out to be. Just a short exchange of "let's get divorced" and "all right" was all it took to end it. After the divorce, as we had agreed, I focused on my rehabilitation and went through each day. Rehabilitation was much tougher than I had imagined, but the therapist was kind, and I made many friends around my age, which made it quite enjoyable. One day, I received a call from Mike on my smartphone. Despite several months passing since our divorce, it seemed some of my belongings were still left at the house. He asked me to come and collect them. I thought he could just throw away what I didn't need, but he stubbornly refused to tell me what was left. He also said he didn't want to mail them because the post office was too far. I felt it was a hassle, and I was scared to go to the house, so I suggested meeting at a nearby busy park instead. On the appointed day, Mike was at the park, looking terrible in a wheelchair, with greasy hair and dirty clothes. "What happened to you?" I asked, but Mike didn't answer, and instead, he looked at me
Why aren't you in a wheelchair?
and shouted. "Well, it was just a fracture. The recovery was slow, but as you can see, I can live with a cane now. The hospital explained it to you when I was admitted, didn't they?" "Well, you didn't listen because you weren't interested, even though your wife had surgery, right?" "Yeah, that's true." "You're unbelievable. So, what's with you being like this?"
Embarrassing as it is, I have a favor to ask. Please, remarry me.
I was taken aback by Mike's second proposal in my life. "Why would you even think of that?" I asked, and Mike started to explain. Apparently, the reason Mike ended up in a wheelchair was that he had fallen off his bike while riding along the riverbank and injured his cervical spine. I couldn't help but to respond. "I told you so many times." Mike loved cycling on his crossbike, but he always had the habit of going too fast. Even when he was younger, he had fallen several times and broken his ribs. His reckless riding style had often been a nuisance. "I know it's your hobby, but you should be more careful, it's dangerous," I would always tell him. Of course, my henpecked husband Mike never listened, and now, as a result, he was in a wheelchair, which was entirely his responsibility. "The hospital told me to use home care, but I don't want to be taken care of by complete strangers." "Just put up with it."
I can't. That's why I want to remarry you, and as you can see, I can't even take a shower or do laundry properly. I can't stand it anymore. Please help me.
"You came here without even showering? It's already a selfish request, and you think someone would accept such a sloppy proposal? And you thought I was still in a wheelchair and wanted to remarry me just for caregiving? There's no way that's happening."
I have no one else to turn to. Living with a cane would be easier than taking care of me in a wheelchair.
His words were unbelievably selfish. He had always been a man who did nothing for himself and expected others to do everything for him. "I absolutely refuse. It's too much trouble to remarry. I want to be free. Got it?" I rejected Mike's proposal as if to return the words he said to me during our divorce, and he asked, "Are you serious?" "I can't believe you're serious with this proposal, Mike. It's way too audacious," I responded with a smile.
Think it over. Are you really going to abandon me in this state?
Mike shouted. "Saying I'm abandoning you is rude. Even in this state, no one would want to marry someone who relies on an ex-wife, no, a stranger. Besides, you are the one who left me first. The accident and your current state, they're all your responsibility. Live your life with greasy hair, dirty clothes, and without taking a shower forever." After expressing truths I never said even during the divorce, I added, "As I said, this is the result of your regret." Mike seemed to realize he couldn't do anything anymore and hung his head completely. At that time, I thought a day would come when he would get tired of living alone despite thinking it was easy because he was used to having people around him, but I never expected it to turn out like this.
Fine. I'll give up on and rely on Karen.
Karen? That's impossible.
What?
Karen is living with me now. Besides, both Karen and her husband hate you. How can you think you can rely on them now? Mike stood there dumbfounded at my words. He seriously thought he could rely on Karen. Maybe he hit his head too hard when he fell off his bike. He really has no one else to rely on. He should just request home care services. By the way, there are 3 reasons why Mike is hated by Karen. The first is that he was excessively a henpecked husband. Not only to me, but he also tried to make Karen serve alcohol during meals, and she got angry.
I'm not Dad's slave.
And began to hate him. The second reason is that he repeatedly tried to introduce his subordinates to Karen as marriage partners. Of course, I stopped him, but he often brought his subordinates to our home under the pretense of just having a meal. And Karen got fed up and furious. The third reason is that when Karen was getting married, Mike heard that one of her fiancé's siblings was disabled and said,
"Are you planning to make Karen take care of him?"
He fiercely opposed the marriage. Her fiancé declared that there was no such plan and that she wouldn't have to, but Mike didn't believe him. Mike originally wanted Karen to marry someone he approved of. I understood he was worried about Karen. But it would have been better if he just opposed the marriage out of concern. Instead, he harshly criticized the fiancé's brother's disability, showing a complete lack of morals. Repeating what he said then would instantly cause a big problem now. While I understood Mike's feelings, his filthy insults made it impossible for Karen to grasp his true intentions. Karen ended up eloping. I didn't oppose the marriage, so I kept in touch with Karen, but as I said before, she cut ties with Mike. There was no way Mike could live with Karen and her husband. In the end, their marriage went well, and Karen didn't have to do any caregiving. Thanks to her high-earning husband Joe, she's living freely as a housewife. Their marriage was the right decision. Right now, I'm actually in a situation where I've had to rely on Karen after my divorce left me without a place to go, and I feel a bit guilty towards Joe. But when Joe said,
"I really liked the pasta you used to make, and so please make it again when you're feeling better,"
it made me feel happy and hopeful that maybe I could stay with them even after I recovered. When I told Mike about our current situation, he asked,
"So, what am I supposed to do?"
"You're not a baby, figure it out yourself."
"What?"
"I've got Karen waiting in the car, so I need to go now. Take care." With that, I left the scene. Considering I'm walking with a cane and he's in a wheelchair, Mike could have caught up if he tried, but he didn't. I remember him just standing there, looking stunned and defeated. Later on.
"By the way, I didn't get to give you the stuff you left behind that day, so can we meet again?"
Mike contacted me again. But Mike hadn't had anything with him that day, so I knew there was no forgotten item and I didn't respond to his invitation. Apparently, Mike had finally decided to hire a caregiver, but just like he did with me, he kept telling the caregiver to do this and that, and they got furious and unleashed a torrent of insults at him. Of course, that caregiver was dismissed and never came back to Mike, but this incident seemed to have traumatized him, and he's been quite distrustful of people since. People who act tough usually crumble easily when faced with real opposition. The new caregiver is kind, but Mike is still scared and probably wants me to come back. That's something I will never do. On the other hand, my leg has healed significantly, and while I can't move as smoothly as I did before the injury, I'm now able to go for walks without much trouble. I've heard that staying inactive would make my leg worse, so every sunny day, I go for walks with Karen and my grandkids. Sometimes Joe drives us to a nearby field with gentle slopes, and we all enjoy a picnic together. I had planned to move out once I could walk again, but Joe told me,
"The kids are so attached to you, so if you don't mind, please stay here."
So, I've decided to stay. Unlike Mike, Joe takes care of himself and even helps with the household chores. He also takes the initiative to support me, and he's truly a wonderful person. Thanks to my divorce from Mike, I'm now surrounded by such a wonderful family and I am happy. Mike, thank you. This is what I deserved all along. Have my kids already, will you? There's absolutely no joy in hearing that from someone you've severed ties with. In fact, it's downright creepy. Besides, it was Kendrick, my ex-husband, who filed for divorce on his own accord. This is just too convenient for him now. As I remained silent, Kendrick, misinterpreting my silence, laughed loudly. You just can't manage without me, can you? What? I'm already remarried, though.
What?
Hearing Kendrick's surprised voice, I couldn't help but laugh.
I never thought you were such a bitch.
His words don't affect me in the slightest. I simply told him, don't contact me ever again, without waiting for a reply, and hung up the phone. Violet, what's wrong? Well, actually. When I told my husband Matthew about the call, he immediately offered to handle it. Turns out, there was another call from someone else, and he plans to deal with it together. As I look forward to the retribution against those two who hurt me, I start making some tea. My name is Violet. I'm a 35-year-old housewife. After divorcing Kendrick about 5 years ago, I remarried. Now, I'm a mother of one child. Given how awful my marriage to Kendrick was, I feel incredibly happy now. I met Kendrick at a trading company's reception desk, where he made the first move and we started dating. Many around me got married through introductions, but my parents, wanting me to have a love marriage, supported my relationship with Kendrick. After getting my parents' blessing, the engagement and marriage happened swiftly, within a year of dating. Kendrick seemed authoritarian, but he was fundamentally kind, and our marriage was smooth at first. However, about 6 months into the marriage, Kendrick's attitude did a complete 180. Hey, dinner.
What?
I was confused by his sudden demand. Just yesterday, it was.
What's for dinner today?
Or, what should we eat for dinner? As I wondered how to respond, Kendrick raised his voice in irritation.
I'm hungry. Hurry up and make dinner.
But I haven't even started on the rice yet.
Useless woman. Forget it. Wait, where are you going?
Ignoring me, he put on his shoes and left abruptly. I stood there, stunned, watching the door he had slammed shut. Did I do something wrong? I tried to recall recent events in my head, but still couldn't figure it out. Eventually, Kendrick returned the next morning, immediately took a shower, and locked himself in the bedroom. Actually, that day was my birthday, and we had promised to go out for a meal, but I couldn't bring myself to say that, so I started doing household chores.
Hey! The noise from the cleaning is too loud. Are you harassing me? No, it's just that since we're not going out today, I thought I'd clean. Not going out is your fault. My head hurts, keep it down.
I'm sorry. Looking back, it's clear Kendrick was in the wrong, but at the time, I convinced myself that I was the one who had upset him. And as Kendrick realized this, he became even more tyrannical.
The food's bad, make it again.
What?
Got a problem with that?
No, no problem. I'm sorry. Every time, whether it was about the meal or cleaning, he found fault, and I grew weary. Yet, I still loved Kendrick and believed he would become kind again. That's why I tensed up every day, making sure the housework was done. But that was a mistake. You're like a mannequin, so boring. One day, Kendrick spat out those words and left. Then, upon his return, with a triumphant look, he declared to me,
I've cheated on you.
What? Why?
Because you're not satisfying. Got a problem with that?
But we're married. Kendrick glared at me with a menacing look. And then he started yelling with a face like a demon.
Do you have a problem with what I do?
It's not that, but...
There's no but. Don't you even know to respect your husband?
Kendrick placed his hand on the wall with a bang. Being 8 inches taller than me, His action made me shrink back completely. Then suddenly, Kendrick spoke to me in a sweet, gentle voice. "I don't want to do this either. All would be good if you tried harder."
Right, I understand. I'll do my best.
That's right.
A husband's affair is the wife's fault.
Hearing that, I actually started to believe it and nodded my head. After that, Kendrick began to lash out at things whenever he was displeased. And afterwards, he would always talk to me in a sweet, gentle voice, explaining, "I'm doing this because I care about you." I was completely trapped by Kendrick's words, believing it was all my fault, my inadequacy, unable to escape the cycle of self-blame. Then one day, Kendrick brought home a young woman.
"This one's pregnant with my child, so from today, she'll live here with me."
"What do you mean?" The woman, with a triumphant look, answered me.
"Meaning, I'm pregnant with Kendrick's child, so you're no longer needed. I'm Ashley, I married Kendrick, and I'll be living here from today."
Suddenly being told she'll live here, I couldn't keep up. Pregnant? Married? So many things hit me all at once, and I was completely confused. I was the one married to Kendrick. We hadn't divorced. So why did this woman claim she was married to Kendrick? To this, Kendrick loudly explained the answer.
"I got bored of you, and I've filed for divorce. You should be thankful to Ashley for writing it for me."
"Thankful? You filed a divorce? What am I supposed to do?"
"Don't care, though I'll keep you as a housekeeper if you want."
Kendrick said this with a nasty smile. At that moment, I finally woke up. "That's fine. I'll leave today."
"Going back to your parents? Make sure you tell them it's all your fault." "No, I'll tell them everything, without hiding a thing." "Hey, wait!"
Ignoring Kendrick's attempts to stop me, I left the house with just my luggage. Upon returning home, my parents were shocked and asked about the situation. I told them everything. They listened to the end and were angry with me. Together with my parents, we went to my dad's company lawyer and sued Kendrick and Ashley for compensation in the divorce. Of course, Kendrick and Ashley refused, but since he filed for divorce on his own and remarried, and with a baby on the way, they couldn't escape it. In the end, we demanded $50,000 from Kendrick and $40,000 from Ashley. They had to take out loans to pay it all at once, but that was none of my business. I started working again, on my own. Initially, I thought about returning to office work, but I liked housekeeping and started taking on jobs personally through my parents' connections. Thanks to word of mouth, my client list grew, and I was busy every day. One of those clients was Matthew. He was wealthy and traveled the world alone, delivering supplies to children and teaching them. Since he was only home a few times a month, he gave me the keys and asked me to clean. Initially, I refused, but after being asked multiple times due to a recommendation from someone I knew, I agreed to clean a few times a month. Eventually, I also cleaned while Matthew was in the US. Matthew, who likes simple things, matched well with me, and we often had engaging conversations. After about 2 years of this lifestyle, Matthew said something unexpected. "I like you, Violet. Would you consider dating me with marriage in mind?"
"What?"
Matthew was handsome and smart, and I was sure there were better women out there for him. That's why I initially refused. But Matthew didn't give up and kept asking me out. I remember how happy he looked when I accepted for the first time. Eventually, I went on 2, then 3 dates with Matthew, and on our 4th date, he asked me again, and I agreed to start dating. He quickly introduced me to his parents and openly stated we were dating with marriage in mind. My in-laws were very kind and didn't mind that I was divorced. After dating for a year, we got remarried. And 2 months later, I discovered I was pregnant with our first child. Our marriage was smooth and trouble-free, and I quit my job, happily taking care of the housework at home. Matthew was always capable around the house, so we often did chores together. With a child on the way, Matthew decided to stay in the US. However, wanting to continue his work, he established an organization and became its president. He turned it into a corporation that generates revenue in the US to support children overseas. Making sure Violet and our unborn child are happy is my top priority. Matthew always said this, and he treated my parents with care. The peaceful days were unimaginable during my marriage with Kendrick, making me feel incredibly happy every day. Now that the compensation payments from the two were complete, they rarely crossed my mind. But one day, an anonymous call came to my mobile phone. It happened to be when Matthew was away for work, and I initially didn't answer, but the persistent ringing forced me to pick up. Hello. Violet? Who is this?
It's me. You haven't forgotten, have you?
His tone made my spine freeze. It couldn't be. I couldn't understand why he was calling now.
Kendrick?
That's right. Way to go, Violet. Being praised like that didn't make me happy at all. I wanted to end the call quickly and prompted him to get to the point.
What do you want?
You sound like we're strangers. Kendrick cheerfully shared his recent events. However, none of it mattered to me.
This has nothing to do with me, right?
Don't be like that. You must have reflected by now?
Reflected?
I repeated, utterly baffled. Just then, Matthew came home. I gestured to him. And at the same moment, Kendrick, laughing joyfully on the other end, got to the point. Yeah, if you've reflected, I'll take you back.
Take me back?
Have my kids already, will you? There's absolutely no joy in hearing that from someone you've severed ties with. In fact, it's downright creepy. Besides, it was Kendrick who filed for divorce on his own accord. This is just too convenient for him now. As I remained silent, Kendrick, misinterpreting my silence, laughed loudly. You just can't manage without me, can you?
What? I'm already remarried, though. What?
Hearing Kendrick's surprised voice, I couldn't help but laugh.
I never thought you were such a bitch.
His words don't affect me in the slightest. I simply told him, don't contact me ever again, without waiting for a reply, and hung up the phone. Violet, what's wrong? Well, actually. When I told Matthew about the call, he immediately offered to handle it. Turns out, there was another call from someone else, and he plans to deal with it together. As I look forward to the retribution against those two who hurt me, I start making some tea. A few days later, a lawyer visited our house. This was the lawyer who had helped during the divorce, and now, he was handling not only my dad's company but also Matthew's. When we told him about the recent incident, he immediately took action. As Matthew, the lawyer, and I were discussing, my phone rang. I exchanged looks with the two of them and placed my mobile phone on the table. Answering on speakerphone. Violet. That call was too sudden for you last time, wasn't it? But don't sulk and lie. You can't be remarried, I'm still here. Hearing his selfish interpretation made me sigh. Feeling embarrassed that I ever liked such a man. Matthew, sensing my feelings, responded with a wry smile. That's not a lie. I am Violet's current husband.
Huh? What are you talking about? Violet, just report this delusional guy to the police.
It's not a misunderstanding, we are truly married. We've even filed the marriage documents. Matthew spoke calmly throughout, while Kendrick grew increasingly irritated. I made it clear to Kendrick. What he's saying is true. I'm remarried. So, please don't contact me anymore.
I told you to stop sulking. So, you've been told to say that, huh?
Not at all. In fact, our lawyer is here right now. He can explain if you'd like. The moment I mentioned the lawyer, Kendrick became noticeably agitated over the phone. Then he commanded me in an annoyed tone.
Then just divorce him quickly and come back. I'll forgive you if you apologize sincerely. I'll come to pick you up tomorrow.
Kendrick's inability to understand was giving me a headache. That's when the lawyer spoke up calmly.
Kendrick, you do know there's a restraining order against you approaching Violet? Any contact means you'll owe her compensation. What? That's expired, right?
Not at all. It's ongoing. The lawyer's words finally took the wind out of Kendrick's sails. But then, Kendrick tried a softer approach, trying to persuade me. Come on, Violet. You'd be happier with me, wouldn't you? Is it really impossible? It's impossible. After all, I have a child now.
What? A child?
Kendrick, possibly shocked, went silent over the phone. Matthew then declared, as if delivering the final blow.
I can make Violet happier than you ever could, being self-centered and authoritarian. We will not divorce, and she will never go back to you.
I nodded in agreement and held Matthew's hand. And while Kendrick remained silent, I hung up the phone. For about 2 weeks after that, there were no calls from Kendrick. Just when I thought he might have given up. Our doorbell rang one day. Who could it be? I was shocked when I approached the intercom. Kendrick was there with Ashley, the woman he had cheated with. I had heard they had broken up, but it seemed they were still connected. Holding my mobile phone, I pressed the record button before responding.
You know you're not supposed to come near. You. If you have money, return the compensation from the divorce.
I thought people changed over 5 years, but hearing Ashley's words, it seemed they were after money.
My wealth has nothing to do with returning the compensation to you. It's the same thing. How much money do you want?
No, that's not what this is about. Despite their infidelity, they were boldly demanding, which was baffling. I was baffled. Then Ashley began to spill her situation uninvited.
I'm engaged. To a supervisor at work, he's a great guy. I can't tell him about my debt, you understand, don't you? Congratulations on your engagement. But what does that have to do with the compensation money?
I genuinely didn't understand, and my attitude seemed to have struck a nerve with Ashley. That's when Ashley, even through the intercom, began to get angry.
Like I said, just pay back the money I already paid you. You're not struggling for money, are you? I heard you're rich.
Ashley's hysterical screaming was frightening. Even with the auto lock, I worried what if she somehow forced her way in through a window. While I was pondering this, Ashley yelled even louder.
Besides, where did you find such a handsome guy? He suits me better, give him to me.
I'm sorry, but my husband, Matthew, is not an object.
Of course I know that.
Ashley snapped back right after my response, and Kendrick burst into laughter behind her. It might have been funny, but it was rude. Then Ashley turned her anger towards Kendrick.
It's all because you didn't have money, which I didn't know about in the first place.
Kendrick, annoyed, retorted.
You lied about being pregnant too. That was a misunderstanding. What? You were so sure of yourself.
The two of them, forgetting my presence, started arguing. The pregnancy mentioned from before was a lie, it seems. Somehow, this eased a thorn in my heart. Just then, a police officer appeared on the intercom screen. This is just... It's not what it looks like, officer. It's just a small argument. They began making excuses. But the police officer was having none of it and took them away. I slumped down by the intercom, exhausted.
Glad they didn't get in. Are you okay?
Turns out, Matthew was the one who had called the police. Actually, I had contacted Matthew before answering the intercom. He told me to record the conversation and that he would be back soon. Sorry for bothering you when you're busy, and thank you. Your safety is the top priority, don't worry about it. Matthew's reliability made me feel grateful. I was truly glad I remarried him. I felt this from the bottom of my heart. The lawyer had informed the police about the restraining order, so Kendrick and Ashley were severely reprimanded. However, now the lawyer receives daily calls demanding money to be returned.
It seems we need to settle this once and for all.
After receiving a call from the lawyer, Matthew and I decided to confront them head-on. When we told them through the lawyer we wanted to meet, Ashley and Kendrick were thrilled, probably thinking they would get some money. We prepared thoroughly for the day. On the day of the showdown, my parents also came, having been informed beforehand. When we arrived at the designated place, the two were already there, and to my surprise, my former in-laws were present as well. The former in-laws glared at me fiercely as they saw me. Thank you all for gathering today. Let's begin the discussion. At that signal, everyone turned to look at me. I first placed 2 sheets of paper on the table. These were the fines for violating the restraining order. Kendrick and Ashley's eyes widened upon seeing them.
What is this amount? There's no way we can pay this.
The papers stated a fine of $30,000 for each of them. They complained to me in surprise. Then, ex-mother-in-law Eliza spoke up.
Violet, aren't you getting a bit carried away? Excuse me?
Confused, I was taken aback as Eliza laughed mockingly and began to speak fluently.
We've already paid the compensation for the affair. And yet you demand more money. I thought wealthy people were more generous, but you're rather petty.
Petty. Essentially, she was suggesting to drop this new claim. But even I was not willing to do that. Indeed, I'm not struggling for money, but this is a penalty for breaking a promise. They are obliged to pay. I explained this to Eliza. However, Eliza was not convinced.
That's the thing, you were once our daughter-in-law, weren't you? And yet to do such excessive things. I couldn't imagine doing that.
Eliza's words were echoed by nods from Kendrick and Ashley. Their unanimous agreement seemed to embolden them. Sighing, I played the recent recording. Eliza turned red in the face upon hearing it. Then Matthew pointed it out.
Oh, are you embarrassed? A man almost 40 getting detained by the police outside his ex-daughter-in-law's house. I'd be too ashamed to show my face in public.
Eliza glared sharply at Matthew, grinding her teeth in frustration, unable to retort. I felt I needed to say something. So I spoke up.
Well, at least nothing was broken. If the statue had been damaged, it would have been a big deal. That one cost about $800,000. $800,000!
Eliza's face turned pale upon hearing my words. Kendrick and Ashley's mouths dropped open. Then, it dawned on me. I had never mentioned my parents' assets to Kendrick. My parents' total assets are around $29 million, so it's not a big deal for us. But it would be troublesome for Kendrick and Ashley if they had to compensate.
$29, Em? You're lying.
Why would I need to lie? Realizing my words were all true, Kendrick's face went ashen. Ashley, having watched this, suddenly turned to Matthew with sparkling eyes. So, Matthew, you must be quite wealthy too, right?
What?
Matthew clearly showed his disgust, but Ashley kept talking to him. Indeed, Matthew's total assets were similar to my parents. But that was irrelevant to our current discussion.
So why not ditch such a demanding wife and marry me? I'm pretty, you know, and I'd look good in a dress.
Indeed, Ashley was still young and beautiful, enviable even. However, Matthew looked at her coolly. No matter how beautiful you are, it's impossible for me to be swayed. To me, Violet is the most beautiful and dear person in the world. Hearing this said right in front of me was admittedly a bit embarrassing. As I blushed, Ashley glared at me resentfully. Then, I shared something I had remembered with Ashley. By the way, I met one of Matthew's acquaintances recently, who happened to be the president of Ashley's company. When I mentioned knowing Ashley, he asked about our relationship, so I filled him in.
What did you say?
I told him you were my ex-husband's remarried partner, but that you had quickly divorced right after. I made sure to convey that properly. At my words, Ashley's eyes widened, and then she burst into loud tears. Just being honest here, but I felt the need to give another piece of advice. Ashley, I heard you've been unfaithful again. That's not good. You should also be honest about your marital history, or you won't be able to build a trustful relationship with your partner.
How could you do this to me?
What? I only told the truth. I answered with a bright smile. When Kendrick brought Ashley along, I was deeply hurt. This bit of retaliation seemed fairly mild in comparison. Just then, Matthew's mobile phone rang. He answered the call, spoke briefly, then hung up. Then he addressed Ashley. Just now, the president called to inform that your engagement with his son has been called off.
No!
Ashley screamed and collapsed onto the table. While it was a pitiable situation, it didn't concern me much. Please ensure the payment is made, thank you. At that, Eliza, who had been stunned, became persistent.
Because of you, Kendrick will have to bear another debt. Don't you feel bad?
Yeah, don't you feel any guilt? I pondered for a moment. Guilt? I had only done what was necessary. There wasn't much emotion involved. Then, I remembered something I hadn't mentioned yet. That's right. Kendrick's company, it seems Matthew's company has acquired it. He'll be attending the audit report presentation next time. Please take care.
What? You're lying.
I don't lie, right? I sought Matthew's agreement, and he nodded affirmatively. Seeing this, Kendrick seemed defeated, unable to say anything further. However, Eliza, undeterred, tried to persist. At that moment, ex-father-in-law Tarek, who had been silent, spoke up. I'm truly sorry, Violet. Allow me to apologize on behalf of them. With that, he bowed his head, which took me by surprise. Tarek had always spoken out against Kendrick's actions and Eliza's snide remarks during my marriage. He was the one who insisted on paying the compensation from the divorce lawsuit in full, even if it meant taking on debt. Therefore, I harbored no ill feelings toward Tarek. Tarek, please don't apologize. It's all right, let me apologize. As he bowed, Eliza looked at him as if he were unbelievable. I will ensure the compensation is paid in full, even if it means taking on debt. Also, I'm divorcing Eliza.
Divorce? Why? I can no longer tolerate your senselessness.
At Tarek's declaration, Eliza clung to him, her face turning pale. However, Tarek's resolve was firm, and realizing this, Eliza, like Kendrick, became dejected and stopped protesting.
We just need the payment signed off, and you can handle the divorce yourselves.
Understood. Come on, both of you, sign this now. Prompted by Tarek's stern voice, Kendrick and Ashley reluctantly signed the payment agreement. Matthew, my parents, and I verified their signatures before standing up to leave. Just before exiting the room, my parents, who had been silent till then, spoke up. Wasn't differences in values cited as the reason for your divorce? Indeed, our values are vastly different, significantly so. Therefore, we kindly request no further involvement with us.
Violet, who was hurt by Kendrick, is now very happy. If anyone intends to disrupt this happiness, be prepared.
Feeling my parents' love, tears welled up in my eyes. Matthew, holding my hand, gave me a reassuring smile. We left the matter in Tariq's hands and departed from there. Later, the fine for violating the restraining order was duly paid. How they managed it was of little concern to me. Kendrick apparently got fired after failing an audit. It seems he was engaging with women during work hours, neglecting his duties, and simply incompetent at his job. Though he appeared capable during our marriage, it turns out he had been offloading his work onto juniors, who eventually got promoted, leaving him sidelined. Once his performance evaluations tanked, he was promptly offered early retirement. Kendrick accepted the early retirement, but the severance pay went towards repaying his debts, and he was rumored to be job hunting again. However, companies within the same industry were reluctant to hire him, and he ended up working part-time at a grocery store to make ends meet. Ashley's engagement was indeed called off, and it was revealed she had been involved with another man, leading to additional compensation claims. Struggling with payments to me and her ex-fiancé, she quit her job and now works at a nightclub. Given her history of leveraging her looks, it's ironic that at 28, she's considered old in the nightlife industry, struggling to attract patrons and working part-time during the day. While I feel a bit sorry for her as a fellow woman, it also feels like karma. Tariq did go through with the divorce and visited me to convey his well wishes, for which I was grateful. He's now back at his family home, dedicating himself to farming, and I hope he stays healthy and active for as long as possible. As for Eliza, after being divorced by Tariq, she moved in with Kendrick. Having never worked in her life, Kendrick bears all living expenses. Tariq mentioned that Eliza's extravagance often leads to loud arguments at their home. I recently gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, adding joy to our lives. Thanks to Matthew's dedication to childcare, I've been able to get ample rest. Furthermore, since Matthew took paternity leave, we've managed to care for our child more relaxedly during the day. The time we spend discussing this and that about childcare is incredibly joyful. My parents adore their first grandchild, and every time they visit, the collection of new toys grows. Recently, we've accumulated so many toys that we renovated a room into a toy room. Matthew and I are also talking about going on an overseas trip once our child is a bit older. I'm looking forward to a bright future, feeling truly blessed. Violet. It's almost time for feeding.
Okay. I'll be right there.
Today, Matthew is taking care of everything except feeding, so I'm able to read at my leisure. After drinking some caffeine-free tea, I stand up and head to the living room. There, I see our child crying with its back arched and Matthew, looking flustered but happy. It's a scene straight out of a happiness painting, making me smile involuntarily.
What are you smiling about?
Nothing. With that, I take our child from Matthew to start feeding. It feels like this happiness will continue forever. It's strange to have such a premonition. It's bright outside. After feeding, we should go for a walk, all three of us. I shared this idea with Matthew, smiling.